You know what I love about making this video? Of all the videos I've done so far this year, the people watching it are built like me. Because if you wake up every Tuesday morning after the national championship, the confetti has fallen, we've claimed a victor, and you're not ready to say goodbye because you don't want to go into the dark, depressing time that is a world without college football. Yes, we'll have the transfer portal and we'll have spring practice, and we'll definitely continue to talk about the highs and lows going into 2024, but you're not ready to say goodbye to 2023. And why would you? It was a special year in the world of college football. So let's go back and recap some of the highlight moments that really stood out in 2023. But before we do, if you are new here, welcome on into the channel. My name is Cole Thompson. I'm a radio show host based in Houston, and I talk college football daily. So if this is the type of content you enjoy on the regular, simply because the season has ended and the clock has struck zero, does not mean I'm going to stop making content. We're going to have videos, live streams. We got a banner added in. So much to discuss, recapping what we saw in 2023, looking forward to 2024, the transfer portal, head coaching news potentially, all of that. So if this is what you like, make sure you smash that subscribe button down below. Leave a comment telling me your favorite moment of 2023. Tell everybody you know about this channel because we're on the race to become the #1 YouTube show in college football. Go ahead and follow me on social media at Mr. Cole Thompson. That way, the conversation never has to stop flowing. 2023 is going to be a year to remember in the world of college football. When you open up the book of CFP, this will be a chapter that is elongated. You know the Harry Potter books? They're always great stories, but there was one book that stood out because it was just so in depth, and it was the Goblet of Fire. This season is the Goblet of Fire in college football for me because of so much happened. Everything that you could have imagined really unfolded this past year, from breakout teams to sweltering losses to heartbreaking changes at the helm when it came to coaching searches to a sign stealing scandal to a national champion claiming their victory for the first time in 2 decades. So much to get through. So let's just go ahead and recap from the very beginning. At the start of the year, we realized that change was coming to college football. Number one, we knew it was the end of a 4-team playoff era. And so we needed to appreciate the fact that this was where the games matter. I'm not going to say that I will stop watching college football next year, and neither will you, because if you love this sport, you live, eat, and breathe it, you follow message boards, you can't get enough of the content, so you're always baked in. But the games won't have as much meaning the way they did this past year. You know, when you play Michigan versus Ohio State in the game, that might be for seeding. That might be for purposes of where you rank in the college football spectrum. It won't be a winner-take-all showdown. And for a team like Penn State, a loss to Michigan isn't the worst thing in the world because you still control your destiny to the college football playoff now that it's expanded. So we appreciate knowing that that occurred. And more importantly, we got to see unique teams actually make it to the CFP this year in a 4-team playoff. You also saw constant changes around the world. Like, do me a favor. Go back to week 2 and talk about Jalen Milroe's performance against Texas at home in Bryant-Denny Stadium with Nick Saban at the helm, and you lose by 10 points. Now go ahead and remember that this was a kid that had 1 turnover in the entire month of November, had one of the most immaculate plays in the history of the Iron Bowl, led his team to defeating a team that had a 29-game win streak and punched their ticket to the college football playoff. If I told you that I traveled back in time after week 2 and said this was going to happen, you would have called me crazy. You absolutely would have called me crazy if I said, oh, by the way, next week, the performance that you put on the road against South Florida will be worse. You would have laughed your ass off because that's not the Nick Saban way we know. But lo and behold, that was what happened in college football. Another thing, we found out that the Pac-12 was coming to an end. We found out that it was going to be the lights turning off on Pac-12 After Dark. You had Colorado leaving for the Big 12. Then there was rumor and speculation that potentially you could see teams go follow USC and UCLA to the Big 10. Slowly but surely, Oregon and Washington, they hitched their wagon up with now Tony Petitti, and they're going to now make those West Coast trips all the way out to Piscataway, New Jersey, or State College, Pennsylvania, or Minneapolis, Minnesota. They're going to make those trips. But they gave us a show. This was a year when we talk about the Pac-12 and its history and its elongated memories. It stands out because so many things happened. USC goes out and they add in a ton of talent via the transfer portal, have a reigning Heisman Trophy, and to some people, a generational quarterback at the helm. Yet they finished 7-5. They fall to Washington and they nearly lose to Arizona, and they drop a game against Utah and they fall apart against UCLA. And everything that we imagined this past year of them building off of a successful first season with Lincoln Riley, it completely changes. He goes from being a coach that was at one point for the biggest name in college football to now people actually questioning, is he the right guy for the job? He's currently 500 since losing to Utah in the Pac-12 title game. And you wonder, if you make a change at defensive coordinator, does that happen? Meanwhile, we get one of the best stories in college football that completely flew under the radar. Arizona. Arizona goes from being a 1-11 team to 2 years later getting a double-digit win season and a victory over Oklahoma in the Alamo Bowl with a freshman quarterback, with a redshirt sophomore wide receiver going for over 1,200 yards, and a stingy defense that's retaining 5 of its leading tacklers for next season. There is so much optimism for Arizona, and they're building off of it, and they realize we are a roster that may not have 5-star talent, but our 5-star culture will pave the way for us to be successful in the Big 12. Meanwhile, Oregon, they dominated. Bo Nix, of all people, gets his comeback story, finishes with, finishes with the second most touchdowns in college football, has 2 wide receivers go for over 1,000 yards, including his younger brother, Tez Johnson. They find a way to continuously punch their ticket every single week, dominate against everybody. But on the flip side, there's Washington and Michael Penix Jr., a quarterback that many people thought was ready to hang up the cleats after yet another heartbreaking injury at Indiana. Goes and reunites with his former OC, makes magic in year 1, 11-2 finish, comes back for a swan song performance, goes undefeated, leads his team to Las Vegas, secures the final Pac-12 title game. And most importantly, this was a team that fought with the underdog mentality. Every single week, you heard a national pundit say, this is where Washington's going to fall apart. This is where Washington will come back down to reality. Oh, they're not beating this team. No, they may be good against this team, but they're not good against this team. And they ate that. They treated it like it was their mentality. They had an underdog persona with an alpha dog mentality. And that's really what I think is going to stand out about this team. Heisman Trophy worthy quarterback, not to mention a Blitnikoff award worthy receiver. Countless plays defensively where you watch this team step up. Even last night in the national championship, they delivered at times. This was a Washington team to remember. And Kalen DeBoer is probably the smartest hire that Jen Cohen could have left. Yeah, she's now down at USC, but I promise you, they'll remember her name for bringing over him from Fresno State because the team is now better for it going into the Big Ten. Texas of all teams. Look at what they did this past year. We have heard for so long about Texasing. They'll show up for the big games. They'll play well underneath the bright lights. And then when you play a lackluster roster, you crumble, you collapse. And that's been Texas's MO for years. Since Colt McCoy went down in the first quarter, that was what we know about Texas. They never could live up to the hype. They carry the name, they carry the Sona. They always said, we are BACK, and I would always say NOPE. But this was the closest version you got. You saw Jonathan Brooks take over the reins as the new RB1, and he handled business with over 1,000 yards. Adonai Mitchell, probably the most clutch player in the history of college football playoff era, now steps up and gets another touchdown in the Sugar Bowl and is a difference maker for this passing attack. Tavion Sanders is a history maker. Xavier Worthy, great player, exceptional when it comes to special teams as well. Not to mention the defense, top 5 unit. He had a touchdown pass to Devondre Sweat. He hits the Heisman pose down at AT&T Stadium in front of the Longhorn faithful. And you finally get back to the glory days of what you know when it comes to this team actually meeting expectations. First conference championship since 2009. And what a way to now go into next season. And Brett Yormark has to go and introduce the defense. Oh, wait, he can't do that because they're now in the SEC and they're built for the SEC. They have a roster coming back that I think is going to be exceptional. They're a team that is on the come up. And as long as they continue to recruit and develop talent, which is a big underlying factor that does not get enough credit for Steve Sarkisian, they're in good hands going into the on the 40 acres going into the SEC. Another team, Oklahoma. A lot of people were ready to give up on Brent Venables. Well, he led you to a 10-3 season, a top 15 finish in the college football and AP poll. Your quarterback was phenomenal. You beat Texas one more time, which kind of took away from the sting of losing to Mike Gundy and Bedlam, who, by the way, also had a breakout player. Imagine if Ollie Gordon starts the season as the lead tailback. Imagine if he doesn't start to hit his stride once you play Iowa State. Maybe you actually win one more game. Maybe you don't lose to South Alabama. And maybe he becomes one of the historic 2,000-yard rushers in college football history. And he more than justifiably earns the Doak Walker Award, but punches his ticket all the way to a Heisman finalist vote. Speaking of the state of Texas, Jimbo Fisher got let go. Finally, it happened. I didn't think it was ever going to happen with that lucrative contract, but you see the way that college football works. 7-5 ain't going to cut it for a coach that's making top 10 money. Clemson, for that matter. Clemson is going to have to change its entire background. Yeah, they got to 9-4 this year. Yeah, they're going to be ranked inside the top 25. And yes, they are a team that did end up finding at least a pathway, but this is not normal for Clemson. And here's the thing. It could have been. It could have actually been a very phenomenal year for the Tigers out in South Carolina. They could have handled business and run through the ACC. And instead, because Dabo's way of thinking, we believe in if you don't buy into the culture from the get-go, we don't want you on our team, kind of came back to be karma, if you really think about it. And karma's a bitch. That's the only way that you can kind of put it. And so now you got to make a necessary adjustments if you want to be a player next season in the ACC. Not to mention, you're also adding in 3 new teams in SMU, Stanford, and Cal. And one of those teams recently just won their first AAC title. So they're leaving one conference coming in with the ability to say, hey, we have our returning quarterback. We have a head coach that many people believe is in the come up. And we have a roster that has more NIL money than you can count. We are basically Scrooge McDuck in this thing. So they're in a good spot. Also, how about Ohio State? Once again, now the pressure is rising going into 2024 surrounding Ryan Day's keister, because he may not be on the hot seat, but you can't lose to Michigan 4 years in a row and expect to keep your job. It doesn't matter what you do for the rest of the season. You can have a top 5 offense, a top 5 defense, dismantle Wisconsin and Purdue and Michigan State and Nebraska and every team on the schedule. But if you come up short against Michigan, against your rival, a third year, the pressure is blooming. And you watch as your quarterback of all people says, I don't want to be here anymore. So he leaves and now is going to Syracuse, and maybe he'll pan out. Maybe he won't. But it was a year to where you take away all that positivity. You take away all the glory, all the high notes, all the accolades, and just throw it to the back burner because you lost. You lost to Michigan. And now going into this year, you're adding in Quinshon Judkins. You're adding in Will Howard. You're hopefully retaining a lot of talent. Jack Sawyer is going to be back. I will be shocked if Emeka Egbuka and Denzel Burke don't come back. But your expectations are not changing anytime soon. And the flames are ablazing when it comes to Ryan Day's seat. Because if he loses next year, 11-1 may not cut it just to save your job. You have to beat Michigan. And speaking of Michigan, they did it. Meanwhile, they also had one of the biggest sign-stealing scandals in the history of college football. Like, Connor Stallions is playing Halloween week 1, watching Michigan State on the sidelines for Central Michigan, and Jim Harbaugh has no idea about it. But J.J. McCarthy does, because he talks about it immediately as soon as he touches down in Houston. Like, this is a script you couldn't write if even the NFL writers came on over and said, let's add this into the party. It just wasn't going to happen. So Michigan loses its coach at the start of the year for a self-imposed ban. They handle business against those teams that you knew they were going to beat. And then right before the toughest part of their schedule, hey, Jim, yeah, you're suspended for the rest of the season. Best of luck to you, and hopefully your team does not mess up. What do? They double down, and they show you that they are more than just a roster led by a great coach. Great coaching articulates exceptional rosters. And elite rosters, I've said this before on this program and I'll continue to say it, elite rosters don't mean they don't have flaws. What it means is they have a strength and an identity and they embrace it. And they did it all year. Physical up front, outwork you in the trenches, and most importantly, when we can't throw the football and when we're out of options, we're just going to gun it down your throat until you stop us. Penn State couldn't do it. Ohio State couldn't do it. Alabama couldn't do it in the fourth quarter. Big 4th down conversion by Blake Corum to set up eventually a Roman Wilson touchdown. He comes on strong, securing his spot in Ann Arbor history as the all-time running back leader in touchdowns, the one that sends you to the national championship. And after all the self-inflicting wounds and J.J. McCarthy sitting on a podium last year telling all of us, we'll be back, he kept his promise. Wins a national title, first time since 1997. Meanwhile, when it comes to individual awards, I don't think you can tell a better story than Jaden Daniels. Daniels, if you guys remember, was a very good quarterback at Arizona State. He was phenomenal, and he actually was building a great rapport with Herm Edwards. And then the entire scandal happened, and Edwards was fired, and Antonio Pierce was shown the door, and there was all the rumors and speculations. But does anybody remember the video? Anybody? They showed as Jaden Daniels' locker was being raided, and players in the Sun Devil Stadium were saying, this guy's a loser, this guy's a bum, this guy doesn't believe, this guy sucks, all of that. And he goes to LSU. And the second he touches down to LSU, you know what the first thought is? It's a good quarterback to set the tone early while Garrett Nussmeier prepares to take over as QB1. Or Walker Howard gets ready to take over as QB1. That's Brian Kelly's guy. BK is going to bring in his personnel, and his personnel is going to work. That never happened. No. Instead, he said, shut up. This is my team. I'm going to run the show. And if you think otherwise, come take it away from me. No one could. LSU doesn't win 9 games this past year without Jaden Daniels. Their defense makes them one of the most underachieving teams, and it's so weird to say when you get 10 wins for a second consecutive season and you underachieved. But we had aspirations of this team going to the national championship, and a lot of people still doubted Jaden Daniels. Go back to the start of the year. Listen to the conversations, especially after that Florida State game. It's time to move to Nuss. Is this the year where we say thanks, but no thanks, Jaden Daniels? And all I did was he made history, becoming one of 7 players to reach 4,000 passing yards and 1,000 rushing yards in a single season. The second player in SEC history to do it, only behind Johnny Manziel. Wins the Heisman Trophy, clear cut, the best player in college football. Lives up to his name and rewrites the history books for the better. Just all of that happened this year. You can't tell the story of college football without the goblet of fire book that is 2023. And 2024 is going to be great. We're going to have more competition when it comes to the college football playoff. We're going to have more opportunities for bigger games on major networks. We're going to see what Texas can do as they make the jump over to the SEC, or what Oregon can do, or USC can do. Now they have to play against Big Ten bully football. Are they going to carry that mantra that carried them to countless Pac-12 titles? We got new teams coming to the Big 12. That's going to be the best conference when it comes to versatility. You're going to have everything from the spread offense to finite defenses. You're adding in an old school coach in Willie Fritz down in Houston. And if they put money in the NIL collective, ladies and gentlemen, I don't think you are ready to see what a team like Houston can do when everything is clicking for them. They were great at the AAC level. Imagine that type of persona carrying over to the Big 12. That's coming in. Not to mention NIL and the transfer portal has taken over waves, and now we're seeing players leave fundamentally sound programs to chase their dreams for another team, for another roster, because of they want to make the most money. You're watching as a quarterback leaves one school because if he realizes there's a great name waiting in the wings for you coming up in 2024. Dylan Gabriel's going to Eugene, Oregon, not because he wasn't good for Oklahoma, because Jackson Arnold is waiting in the wings to take over and show the world he means business. The same thing for Avery Johnson in Manhattan, Kansas, and Nico Iamaleava in Knoxville, Tennessee. There is so much optimism going into 2024, and I can't wait for it. But it's hard to say goodbye to 2023 because this year was just built differently from teams on the come up like Arizona, Missouri, Ole Miss, getting 11 wins for the first time in program history. Who says opposites don't attract? Lane Kiffin, Sunnyside, West Coast, Best Coast, now touching down in the Magnolia State. Yeah, I think he's doing pretty well for himself, and he's earning a fine payday in the process. Teams like Missouri, teams like Virginia Tech. That's a team that I really want to talk about. I'll probably get to it in another video. But the way they finished this season, I think any doubt about Brett Pry being the guy is exactly what you want to see answered. And mission accomplished on that front. You had teams take a major step back in Texas A&M and Clemson. And I wonder about a roster such as potentially Wisconsin. You know, you go out and you pay for Luke Fickell. Is he going to be able to deliver in 2024? Is that what's going to happen? Meanwhile, another team on the come up that nobody saw coming, David Braun at Northwestern. Guy is defensive coordinator and immediately is named interim head coach, leads his roster to an 8-win season. We thought this team was going winless. And all that's in store. But this was a special season. This was one that we will remember for quite some time. And I'm grateful that I get to do this job. Before I get on out of here, I just want to say to all the new subscribers, all the old subscribers, everyone out there who has been a part of this journey through 2023 as I've made the jump over to YouTube, thank you. Because I don't know what else I can do in my life. I have been doing this for the last 8 years since I graduated college from the University of Alabama. I have been trying to break into this industry. And the one thing about me that I remember since I was a little kid, and my grandfather, who is my biggest idol and probably the reason I do this, told me that you have no fear and you just got to go continue to put yourself out there. And so I do so. And so when I get knocked down, I keep standing back up. And doing these videos and talking with you fans every single day gives me a sense of purpose and direction. And I hope that you continue to subscribe. I hope that you join in the party for the offseason, because guess what? We got a ton of content coming out. We're going to recap everything that we saw in 2023. I got predictions for my radio show that I'm going to read on here. Where was I right? Where was I wrong? Who are the teams going into 2024 that possess the most optimism? Which teams right now look like they would make the college football playoff? What changes are we going to see in the SEC now that Texas and Oklahoma are in the fold? Who's going to be the breakout roster in the Big Ten? Which team are we not talking about enough after moves being made this offseason? All of that's coming. And I hope that you are here for the process. I hope that you stick around and watch this channel bloom and blossom, because I'll tell you this much. I'm a lot like Washington. I have no quit. I have no fear. There is no off switch for me. And I'm going to continue to do this for as long as possible until I can. And so for all of you who are new at this channel, thank you so much for giving me a purpose. Thank you so much for reminiscing 2023 with me. And I can't wait to see what happens going into 2024. It's going to be a special season, just like 2023 was. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching that video. Don't hit the X button yet. Make sure you hit subscribe to keep up with all of our daily content found on Just Saying It and anything else that we post on this channel. Bye.